China announces a series of measures to boost the economy, including a trillion yuan in liquidity. 2 giant pandas will arrive in Hong Kong very soon. Chinese-made deep-sea diving submersible visits the city. Hello and welcome to TVB News. The People's Bank of China has rolled out a string of measures to stimulate the economy. One of the central bank's moves is cutting the reserve requirement ratio by 50 basis points for banks, which could release about 1 trillion yuan for potential lending or investment. Jackie Lin has our top story.
The raft of support measures were unveiled at the press conference jointly held by the People's Bank of China, the National Financial Regulatory Administration, and China Securities Regulatory Commission in Beijing this morning. China's central bank will cut the reserve requirement ratio, which is the level of cash banks need to have on hand, by 50 basis points. That's set to release about 1 trillion yuan in long-term liquidity from banks to the financial market. To lower the commercial bank's cost of funding, the central bank is also lowering the interest rate of 7-day reverse repurchases from 1.7% to 1.5%. To ease borrowers' mortgage interest expenses, mortgage rates for existing home loans are expected to be lowered by 0.5 percentage points on average. The new mortgage policy is expected to benefit 150 million people or 50 million households and save the interest expenses for households by a total of around 150 billion yuan every year. The minimum down payment ratio for both first and second properties will be unified, with a nationwide minimum down payment ratio for second property to be reduced from 25% to 15%. Pan Gongsheng, governor of the People's Bank of China, hopes the new policy can boost the country's economy. Pan said the moves will balance the banking system's robustness and the need to boost the country's economic growth and market confidence. Tommy Ong, managing director of a financial consultancy company, said more complementary stimulus measures are needed to maximize the effectiveness of the policies and to maintain the GDP growth rate at 5% to maintain market optimism. They include the issuance of consumption vouchers and bonds. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
Chief Executive John Lee announced the 2 giant pandas gifted by central authorities to Hong Kong will arrive in the city on Thursday. The 2 national treasures are both 5 years old. Residents can expect to meet the animals in the middle of December. Authorities will organize a series of events celebrating the arrival of the pandas. Timothy Lee tells us more.
The latest photos of the 2 giant pandas gifted by the central government to Hong Kong have been revealed. Both were born in June 2019. Ke, the female panda, was seen stepping on top of a stone and playfully sticking out her tongue, while An, the male panda, could be seen walking around and relaxing at the Giant Panda Reserve in Sichuan. This as Chief Executive John Lee shared some of the national treasure's characteristics earlier today, saying that both pandas are filled with life.
The male is An, weighing about 130 kilograms. He's agile and energetic. The female is currently called Ke, weighing 100 kilograms. She loves to climb and has a very tender temperament.
An and Ke are set to arrive in the city on Thursday, and they will be welcomed at the airport before they are quarantined at Ocean Park. Residents could expect to see them in the middle of December. The chief executive also noted the 2 animals will be renamed in October and invited residents to suggest meaningful and creative names. The name An is not unfamiliar to the city, as another male panda named An had resided in Hong Kong for 23 years, before he died at the age of 35 in 2022. Regarding the 2 baby pandas born to giant panda Ying, the CEO hopes they could meet the public by the beginning of next year. He said there will be also a public naming event for the panda twins sometime in the future. Meanwhile, the Hong Kong Jockey Club announced it has approved and donated over $121 million to Ocean Park to help upgrade animal habitats within the park's giant panda facilities. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Before the 2 giant pandas arrive in Hong Kong later this week, fans from the city visited their home in Sichuan. Sakura Ip reports from Sichuan.
Sichuan, the home of the giant panda. Tourists from around the globe are flocking in to see these adorable creatures. 2 of them will arrive in Hong Kong this Thursday, and some Hong Kong tourists travel to Sichuan to welcome Hong Kong's new residents. Ms. Lee hoped to greet them here but was unable to see them. She wished them good health and hoped to see many baby pandas in the future for Hong Kong.
The China Giant Panda Protection and Research Center has established 4 major bases in Sichuan. The one we're at now is located in Dujiangyan. It has received more than 1 million visitors since 2014. Including the one in Wolong, 2 bases are permanently open for free to Hong Kong residents.
Pandas also create business opportunities. Visitors are drawn to panda souvenirs at the entrance. Carol, a visitor from Hong Kong, purchased dolls and tote bags for their children in Canada. Mr. Liu, the store owner, showcases his latest product this year, a brown giant panda doll with sound, priced at around 240 yuan. He said that tourists often spend hundreds or even thousands of yuan there, allowing him to make a profit of around 400 to 500 yuan a day. Sakura, TVB News, Sichuan.
Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office Chief Xia Baolong met Hong Kong's Chief Executive John Lee last Friday in Beijing. Lee said Xia affirmed the work of the SAR government during the meeting. Lee said Xia noted the importance of solidarity among all sectors of Hong Kong society to promote economic growth and development. Xia said that includes the business sectors as well as entrepreneurs in Hong Kong. Addressing crowd management concerns ahead of the opening of the Kai Tak Sports Park early next year, Lee said large-scale trials concerning the facility will be undertaken beforehand. Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with his Japanese counterpart Yoko Kamikawa in New York City. The 2 disclosed the recent fatal stabbing of a Japanese schoolboy as well as the agreement concerning nuclear wastewater at the Fukushima nuclear power plant. Danny Zhou has the story.
The meeting between China and Japan's top diplomats lasted about an hour at the headquarters of the United Nations. Both of them stated the fundamental role of people-to-people exchanges. They vowed to maintain communication and dialogue at all levels, including jointly safeguarding regional peace and development. Referring to the killing of a Japanese student in Shenzhen last week, Wang stressed it was an individual case which the Chinese authorities will investigate. He reiterated Beijing's commitment of securing the safety of all foreigners in China and urged Tokyo to avoid politicizing or escalating the case. They also discussed the agreement on the long-term monitoring arrangements of the Fukushima wastewater and independent sampling and monitoring by stakeholders, including China. Kamikawa pledged to carry out additional monitoring and work towards a complete lift of China's ban on Japanese marine products. Wang stressed that Beijing opposes the discharge of the nuclear-contaminated water into the ocean and said Japan should live up to its promises. Danny Zhou, TVB News.
Up next, former U.S. Security Council President gives advice to Hong Kong. More deaths in Gaza and Lebanon as conflict with Israel continues. Ukraine announces victory plan and seeks support from the West. Welcome back. Hong Kong has been the subject of criticism by some Western countries and media in recent years, partly as a result of geopolitical and economic tensions between the U.S. and China. Kishore Mahbubani, a former president of the United Nations Security Council, said in TVB's Straight Talk program that Hong Kong should send people who are strong and articulate to explain the city's real situation to the West. Jackie Lin has the story.
Hong Kong has been affected by tensions between the US and China in recent years, with the city at the receiving end of negative reports by some Western media. Kishore Mahbubani, a former president of the United Nations Security Council, told TVB Straight Talk program that Hong Kong should be more proactive and explain the city's reality to its Western critics.
When I go to the United States and people speak to me about Hong Kong, I'm not exaggerating. They think people in Hong Kong are locked up in a prison. That you have no freedom to do what you want to do. And yet, paradoxically, Hong Kong is one of the freest economies in the world.
Mahbubani, a former top diplomat from Singapore, said Hong Kong should persuade people to come to the city to see how the economy is thriving and how everything functions well.
If the gap between perception and reality is growing, it's very important not just to focus on the reality, but focus on changing the perception of Hong Kong.
Mahbubani is also a distinguished visiting scholar at the University of Hong Kong. He quoted the example of how the late Singaporean leader Lee Kuan Yew faced Western critics.
One year, I accompanied Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, then Prime Minister of Singapore, to a meeting with the American Society of Newspaper Editors. And Mr. Lee Kuan Yew literally walked into the lion's den because Singapore had just restricted the circulation of Wall Street Journal in Singapore. And the American media was up in arms against Singapore. But what did Mr. Lee Kuan Yew do? He went straight into the lion's den and debated them. So it's very important for Hong Kong then to find people who are strong and articulate and send them out and argue the case of Hong Kong forcefully.
Jackie Lin, TVB News.
Jiaolong, a deep-sea diving submersible developed in the mainland, along with its scientific exploration mothership, Shanghai Yihao, made its inaugural visit to Hong Kong. Timothy Lee reports.
Chinese-made research vessels Jiaolong and Shanghai Yihao arrived in the city for the first time at around 7 this morning, before docking at the ocean terminal in Shimsha Chui. The Jiaolong submersible is 8.2 meters long, 3 meters wide, and has a height of 3.4 meters. It is capable of reaching depths of up to 7,000 meters. Its mothership, Shanghai Yihao, recently completed its 45-day research mission in the Western Pacific Ocean, while Jiaolong completed 18 missions collecting some 600 biological samples. Xu Xuewei, deputy director of the National Deep Sea Center, said the vast amount of samples collected by Jiaolong proved its ever-increasing capabilities. He added the mainland-made thrusters and cameras that are part of the Jiaolong vessel allowed the crew to operate the vehicle at faster speeds and capture clearer images. Among the 18 crew members, 3 come from Hong Kong, and they also took part in underwater missions. Shan Zhang, a researcher in the Department of Ocean Science at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, said the depths she reached during her underwater mission allowed her to experience the complete darkness of the deep sea. The research crew will attend seminars related to deep sea science and international forums during their stay in the city. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Foreign Minister Wang Yi voiced China's support for Lebanon in safeguarding its sovereignty, security, and national dignity. Wang made the remarks during a meeting with Lebanese Minister of Foreign Affairs and Immigrants Abdallah Bo Habib, calling for a permanent ceasefire and comprehensive withdrawal of troops in Gaza. Wang said China has been keeping a close eye on the recent explosions of communication devices across Lebanon, which have killed nearly 500 people. Wang said China is firmly opposed to indiscriminate attacks against civilians and condemns the breach of basic norms of international relations. Meanwhile, a foreign ministry spokesperson in Beijing called on the international community to take effective measures to reduce tensions in the Middle East. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky kicked off a key visit to the United States, where he is expected to set out a victory plan to U.S. President Joe Biden and leaders of other Western allies. Tracy Furness has more.
Ahead of the United Nations summit in New York and under tight security, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited a Pennsylvania ammunition factory and thanked workers who are producing munitions for his country's fight to fend off Russian ground forces.
You said that 400 people work here, but I wanted very much to come here and to thank you 400 people saved millions of Ukrainians. Because of the result of your work, I'm very thankful, just from ordinary Ukrainians to you.
The following day at the United Nations Summit of the Future, Zelensky said that Ukraine supports efforts to keep all nations united, safe and strictly adhering to the UN Charter.
We are now preparing for the second peace summit, moving forward with our partners step by step according to the peace formula. And we are working on food security, energy security and holding Russia accountable for its terror.
Zelensky is also expected to set out his victory plan to US President Joe Biden and leaders of other allies. Meanwhile, Russian forces struck residential buildings in the Ukrainian town of Mykolaiivka in the Donetsk region, causing major damage. A 52-year-old woman was injured in the strikes, which hit 3 multi-story residential buildings and a hospital. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
In the UK, flash floods have caused flooding in some areas Monday after an overnight deluge that saw months' worth of rain in a 24-hour period. In England's central and southern counties of Bedfordshire and Oxfordshire, houses were submerged after around 60 to 80 millimeters of rain fell, turning roads into rivers. Roads were closed and train lines in London suspended due to the flooding. Leighton Buzzard in Bedfordshire was particularly hit hard, with one resident saying that measures had not been put in place to deal with the flooding. Boeing has announced a 30% wage hike in its final offer to its machinists who have been striking since September 13th. Unsatisfied with the proposal, the workers' union said there won't be a ratification vote before Boeing's deadline at the end of this week. Boeing announced what it called a best and final offer on Monday. It included a 30% wage hike over 4 years and reinstatement of a performance bonus and improved retirement benefits. However, the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers said it did not address priorities around retirement and salary. Italian Premier Giorgia Meloni received the prestigious Global Citizens Award from ex-CEO Elon Musk on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York. The award is given out by the Atlantic Council, an American geopolitical think tank. Meloni used her keynote speech to lay out her vision of the world in which patriotism, nationalism, and pride in Western civilizations and identity are central.
I don't know if nationalism is the correct word, because it often recalls doctrines of aggression or authoritarianism. However, I know that we should not be ashamed to use and defend words and concepts like nation and patriotism, because they mean more than a physical place. They mean a state of mind to which one belongs in sharing culture, traditions, values.
That's the news. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.